For those who have witnessed a wedding objection during the speak now or forever hold your peace portion, what happened? Mom got married to my stepdad, uncle objected. After the attention was focused on them, he just asked if they were still going fishing afterwards. To which my stepdad reached into his suit and pulled out his fishing hat. Very sweet and romantic. They love to fish together. I was working at a wedding when I was younger. I was running the bar at the reception, which was very close to the hall the weddings were at. We were told that the reception would begin around 4 p.m. It was already about 3ish and I was packing fridges, the usual barman things, while one of the male guests was still sitting there drinking. I asked if he was not joining the reception, to which he replied something along the lines of "when I have the courage." He downs his drink, and leaves. 10 minutes later he's back, looking extremely disappointed. Guy orders a drink, and less than 30 seconds later another guy who's dressed extremely well turned out to be the groom, walks in, punches him in the back of the head, and leaves. This dude just picked his drink up and sipped it further. I eventually found out that this dude had downed his drink, walked into the receptions down, admitted to sleeping with the wife on her hen night, and again the night before the wedding. He was never invited to the wedding, he just felt the groom needed to know. So he found out where the wedding was, suited up and dropped the info mid-ceremony. This was in the early 70s in semi-rural Washington state. My cousin was getting married, and my aunt and the mother of the groom did not get along well. During the ceremony, when the pastor got to the part about objecting, my aunt said something to my uncle and the groom's mom jumped up and grabbed my aunt and they started going at it, all the way out the door and into the parking area. They were separated, and everyone filed back into the barn, where the wedding continued. The best part though was when another one of my cousins simply walked into the woods after the wedding because that's where he lived. My aunt was getting married to her second husband, and during the speak now or forever hold your peace bit, their baby started crying. The dude officiating it said if anyone older than 6 months has any objections, speak now or forever hold your peace. He got a laugh and the wedding carried on. They're still together 10 years later, so I guess whatever my cousin had to say was misinformed. The best man at my stepsister's wedding did this. It happened at the rehearsal the night before. It was a very large wedding and the rehearsal was bigger than a lot of weddings. The minister was going over the vows quickly while giving instruction on what to do. When he said something about objections, the best man interrupted saying he had to put a stop to this. He was in love with the bride and was sure she felt the same way. My sister and everyone else was horrified. It caused plenty of chaos and confusion. As far as I know after that neither the bride nor groom ever spoke to him again. To be fair, I didn't witness this, but it happened to my parents. My mom invited an ex she was still rather close with to her wedding and he stood up and yelled "I object." Little did everyone at the wedding know, my dad had gotten rather close with him and paid him to stand up and object just for the shits and giggles and he bursts out laughing. My mom didn't find it as funny and it really started their marriage off on the right foot. It was a medieval themed wedding. The best man declared his love for the bride. Challenged the groom to a fight for her love. They march outside, draw swords and go at it. Apparently they choreographed 2 nights a week for like 6 months, but it honestly looked like they were trying to kill each other. The groom wins and everything goes on like normal. 0 weird but cool. I attended a wedding as a guest of a family member and when THR pastor said that the doors busted open to the sanctuary and a man appeared and started to say "I do." But 2 huge ushers, one who was my date, quickly grabbed the guy before he could say anything but under the arms and literally lifted him up off the floor and carried him out. The wedding continued as normal. Turned out the guy was the ex of the bride. Strangest sight I ever saw. So I'm attending this ultra chill beach wedding in small town Canada. I don't know most anyone because it was my ex step-aunts, so my brother's family I never see. It was fun anyways. The bride flew in on a seaplane and all the chairs were set up on the sand. Anyways, the groom is from Trinidad and Tobago, so all his relatives traveled a long way and had cool accents. There was a party before, we were all a little bit tipsy. So as the ceremony progresses, everyone is watching, getting teary from the vows. Then the line comes. Any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony? Speak now. Nobody expected this. The father of the groom gets up, flailing, and a collective gasp followed by silence overtakes this tiny venue. We're all waiting with bated breath, but Hess just standing there with glassy eyes. Turns out he was baked. This 70 man in a suit and dreads laughs and says "No, I kid," and the whole spirit of the audience cheers up as he sits back down. Rest of the reception, People are going up to him saying good one or scolding him. Damn good night. Best wedding I've been to. At my cousin's wedding, when the exchanging of vows took place, my aunt shouted, "Wasn't there supposed to be a part where you could object?" Or something along those lines. Anti-object. Minister overruled. One of my friends interrupted his cousin's wedding to come out of the closet. He couldn't understand why people were so pissed at him. Edit: this was the second time my friend had come out to his family. The first time was when he was a teenager about 8 years earlier, and 90% of his family that was attending said wedding was already aware. There's a time and place, and that place is definitely not a wedding, and certainly not during the ceremony. When I was 13, we went to my second cousin's wedding. Everything is going great. They even got past the speak now or forever hold your peace part. They wrote their own vows, but before my second cousin's fiancée/wife could even begin her vows, his son got up and announced to the entire room that she was cheating on his dad with her drug dealer and he couldn't let his dad marry her. My second cousin yelled at his son to either sit down or leave. The son left. My second cousin married her anyways, and 5 years and 1 baby later he finds out it was true and they separated, but were too tweaked out to be able to afford a divorce. Finally he got married a third time, but before he could get married, his third now ex-wife had to pay for their divorce. This wedding had no objections. They moved to Missouri, and this time, instead of separating or asking for a divorce, he decided he didn't want to be married anymore and just moved back to Cali to get back together with his second ex-wife. Yep, family dinners are a little awkward. Groom's dad interrupted the wedding to ask the bride's father whether or not she was truly a virgin. Then he went on about how he didn't know anything of the wedding and blah blah blah. Truly weird and embarrassing. I was there with an ex-boyfriend. He is my ex-boyfriend. When the groom's father interrupted the wedding, the bride's father officiating the wedding did in fact say it was confirmed. I have no clue how or what. They seemed to be super conservative and wore sleeve dresses, long hair, etc., and were AF American. They eventually showed the father-in-law out and continued with the ceremony, which was super awkward afterwards. It was literally as if I was on Pranked. Said ex seemed to find the ordeal entertaining because she was humiliated. This was his family bride, and that sort of sealed the deal. Something was wrong with the guy. We broke up a week later. At my own wedding. But not in the traditional way. We were getting married along a river at the end of summer, and tons of wakeboarders and boats were out. I was a ball of nerves, and the ceremony felt so serious. When all of a sudden some dude bro on a boat blasting music screamed, "Don't do it, bro," and sped off. It was actually hilarious and made the rest of the ceremony a lot more fun. My husband and I cracked up, even though his brothers looked like they were about to jump in the river after the guy got booted out of my cousin's wedding reception with about 20 other people. My cousin had her wedding on a farm with a massive pig roast. From what I remember, there was a massive amount of people. Anyway, her father and my other older cousin never really got along. At one point during the reception, my older cousin had enough and absolutely lost it. He looked at a handful of us and asked if we had his back. Of course we all nodded, not really knowing what was about to happen. He disappeared, and a few minutes later comes back with a 20-pound bag of pork meat from the leftover roast. He walks down to where my cousin's dad is. My aunt proceeds to yell, "Lonnie, no!" and smacks him right in the side of the face with the bag of meat. An all-out family brawl ensued. The whole family hasn't been invited to a wedding ever since. I was best man at a wedding, and the groom's older sister decided to play a joke and stood up and said, "I object," then started giggling. Groom's mother stood up, slapped her, told her it was not an appropriate joke, and told her to go home. This mother still refuses to talk to her daughter 4 years later. I saw it nearly happen at my uncle's wedding. A friend of theirs got too drunk, and when Say said speak now, he smiled, started to stand up. My mother grabbed him by his hair and sat him back down by force. It was my mother, the groom's sister. The drunk was a close friend of both the bride and groom, so he was seated up front. Hess a nice dude, but sometimes a bit of a dumbass. It was a small non-traditional wedding. They were wed in the botanical gardens by a justice of the peace. The reception was held in the same place. When you enter the area for the wedding/reception, there was an open bar, so some people helped themselves before the ceremony started. And one overindulged a bit. Went to a co-worker's wedding, and the maid of honor objected and admitted to being the other woman and that the groom had been cheating with her for months. The bride left in tears, and the groom immediately tried to get with the mo, but she told him she wasn't gonna hurt the bride further and that he needs to fuck off. The bride is doing much better and is now a manager here, and I haven't heard from the groom in over a year. The mo and bride are on speaking terms, but I don't think their relationship is gonna ever be what it used to be. It was at my wedding that we had at my grandmother's house, who lives out in the country next to a cattle farm. The cows didn't make a peep till that moments, and one finally went moo. We all laughed and continued, but it was a funny moment about my wedding. Just gotta add the normal part about being my highest post. And best hits about a cow going moo. I was at an Orthodox Jewish wedding with a huppah ceremony where they read a contract and recite 7 blessings. The groom's dad pinched his son's derriere at a most solemn moment, caused him to loudly shriek into the silent audience of 400. Bride saw and snorted loudly. They also publicly kissed after the ceremony, which was a huge scandal.